falling star. And you make a wish. Ooh, just remember, luck is no such thing. One man succeeds while another man fails. Why is it then, you ask, the stars up above, the planets of light, who controls your very soul? From the beginning of earth and throughout eternity, that's the stars up above. Just ask them. Ooh, just ask them. The planets of light, who controls your very soul?
Welcome to Astrology Numerology Now. I'm your host, Z Starman, and this is a special edition of Astrology Numerology Now, where we're going to talk about an astrological event that so many people have been anticipating and waiting for ever since the start of the year 2017. And that astrological event that's getting ready to happen is the entrance of Saturn into the sign of Capricorn. Saturn will be entering the sign of Capricorn on December the 19th at 11:27 a.m. And it's going to be in Capricorn for at least until 2020. Now, as we see on the graphic on the screen, Saturn is going to be in Capricorn from December 19th, 2017 to March 21st, 2020. And then it's going to go into the sign of Aquarius. And then on July 1st, 2020, Saturn is going to retrograde back into the sign of Capricorn and finish out its journey on December 20th or December 17th, 2020. So Capricorn, Saturn's going to come into Capricorn, go into Aquarius, then come back into Capricorn. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what Saturn's about. Saturn's about restriction and limitation, but also it can force you to confront yourself, to really solidify all the important things in your life. Throughout my almost 40 years of astrology, I've seen so many people classify Saturn, and sometimes rightfully so, as a doom and gloom planet. Saturn is there to make you stand up. It's there to make you step up to your obligations and to your responsibilities. And depending on where it is in your astrology chart, and we're going to talk about Saturn through the signs on this special edition of Astrology Numerology Now, Saturn is there to make you to grow up. A lot of people who were born in 1989 to about 1991, they have Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, and a lot of you will experience your Saturn return. Astrology or society says you're an adult at age 21, but astrology says you're an adult when your Saturn return comes back around. So most born in 1989 to about 1991, they're experiencing their Saturn return. But again, Saturn is not a doom and gloom planet. I don't think so. It can be challenging. It can be struggling. It can challenge you, and that's what Saturn is there to do. It's there to challenge you. But it's also there, since we got those rings around Saturn, those crystal rings around Saturn, it's there to make you step up to the plate. It's there to challenge you. It's there at times to make you stronger. And it's there at time, and especially when it's in the sign of Capricorn, it's coming home. Saturn is the ruler of the sign of Capricorn. It's exalted in the sign of Libra or in the 7th house. And in old school astrology, Saturn also ruled the planet or the sign of Aquarius. So Saturn's there to challenge us. Saturn is there to show you at times, look, this is where you have to step up to the plate. This is where you owe. It's like the IRS. The IRS comes knocking on some people's door and it says, okay, what do you have to show? What do you have to contribute to society? And a lot of people with Saturn in Capricorn, and since Saturn rules Capricorn, me personally, I can't wait for Saturn to enter the sign of Capricorn. I remember Saturn in Capricorn 30 years ago in 1989 to 91. My son was born during that period, and it was one of the best periods of my life. Some people are going to struggle with Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, and especially the sign of Cancer, because Saturn is opposite your sun sign when it's in the sign of Cancer. A lot of people who are of the cardinal signs, this is going to be a really challenging time for you. Cardinal signs are the signs that start the seasons. Aries people, Libra people, Cancer people, and also with Capricorn coming back to its home sign, or Saturn coming back to its home sign of Capricorn, it's going to unite and make a lot of Capricorn people stronger, a lot of Capricorn rising people stronger. But it's also there to test you and to say, okay, world, what do you have to show? And if you don't have the right things to show the universe over the last 30 years, it's like, okay, you got to pay for this. You're going to have to pay a tax on this. You're in bad health and Saturn is there, or in that part of your astrology chart, you're going to pay for that. But Saturn's basic energy is to crystallize, is to make things solid and whole and to solidify. And it is limitations and restrictions. I know how Saturn was when it was in the sign of Sagittarius over the last couple of years and its opposition to my Gemini planets, and I couldn't wait for Saturn to leave the sign of Sagittarius. But I think this Saturn in the sign of Capricorn is going to be very helpful. A lot of things in government fall. I remember in 1991, the Berlin Wall came down when Saturn was in the sign of Capricorn. So we're going to have a lot of changes in our government, a lot of changes in the government structure, a lot of changes in the United States of America's government with this transit of Saturn in Capricorn. Wait and see. Hear me now, believe me later. It's coming. Saturn in Capricorn. Now, we're going to talk about the significance of Saturn in the sign of Capricorn through all 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, I'm going to give a solar reading, and for those who actually know their rising sign. So let's say if you're a Capricorn and you don't know your rising sign, you can still hear what I have to say about Saturn being in the sign of Capricorn. Let's say if you do know your rising sign, you can look at it from your rising sign or your solar sign or your sun sign. So there are two ways to look at things, just from your sun sign and also from your rising sign if you know it, and that's determined by your birth time. So let's get started. If you are a Capricorn, or if you have Capricorn rising in your astrology chart, this transit is going to be in your solar first house or natal first house. Capricorn, Saturn passing through your natal first house, if you're a Capricorn or if you have Capricorn rising, it's going to prove some challenges to your individual self. A lot of people out there will struggle with physical ailments. A lot of people with Saturn transiting through the first house will find some difficult times and energy. But also, I remember when I had Saturn transiting through my first house a couple of years ago, it made me stronger. It made me wiser. And that's what Saturn's there to do. And the first house rules the individual self. If you're looking at a clock on the wall, the first house is like between 9 o'clock and 8 o'clock if we're looking at the astrology chart. So that's where it is, Saturn in the first house. It can be difficult for some people, but if you know you have Saturn transiting through your first house, you'll know how to deal with it and say, hey, I have to step up to the plate and crystallize the things in my life to make me stronger, to make me a better person. Some people will struggle. Some people will, you know, Saturn rules bones and skeletons, so a lot of people can suffer with Capricorn rising, or Capricorns can suffer with arthritis and a lot of crazy illnesses. If you're a Capricorn, or if you have Capricorn rising, now more than ever is the focus on building your health and getting stronger and getting the wisdom and knowledge that you need to get you through life. If you are a Sagittarius or have Sagittarius rising, Saturn will make a transit through your second house, your house of money and finances. Learn how to solidify and manage your money properly with Saturn, because Saturn, there may be little or no money if you have Sagittarius rising, or if your sun sign is Sagittarius, because Saturn will be in your second house. And the second house in astrology is like between 8 o'clock and 7 o'clock on a clock. Get your finances together. A lot of you will have great money opportunities. Again, I don't look at Saturn as being totally doom and gloom. It's a big planet. It can go one way or the other, crystallizing your finances or wreaking havoc on the things that you own, your possessions, your money, your house, your property. And this is if you're a Sagittarius or if you have Sagittarius rising sign. Straighten out your finances with Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. Up next is if you're a Scorpio or if you have Scorpio rising sign, Saturn is transiting through your natal third house, the house of brothers, sisters, and short trips and journeys. A lot of people are out there, especially with Scorpio rising, or if you don't know, if you're a Scorpio and don't know your rising sign, you can look at it this way, is that a lot of you have estranged relationships with family members, with brothers and sisters. Now it's time to solidify that. And also, a lot of you can be hindered and hampered by brothers and sisters. Some of you can have mishaps because the third house rules education. A lot of you may have decided to go back to school or have issues in learning and processing information. But the big thing how Z Starman sees Saturn in the third is trying to solidify your arrangement with your brothers and sisters. With Saturn, if you have Scorpio rising sign, and it's making that transit through your natal third house. Up next is if you're a Libra, or if you have Libra rising sign. Again, if you don't know your rising sign, you can just look at it through the sun sign. So if you're a Libra who doesn't know their rising sign, or if you're a person who has Libra rising sign, Saturn will be at the bottom of your chart. It'll be making a transit through your fourth house, the house of family, the house of women, the house of emotions. A lot of people, Saturn will be putting you in an emotional bind and configuration where you'll be upset, you'll be depressed, and you have to fight through this Saturn depression. A lot of females, I don't like using that word, but a lot of women will struggle with Saturn in the fourth house. If you're a Libra, there's issues with family, women, and also crystallizing a stronger bond with the women in your family. Saturn, the fourth house, also rules the end of life. So a lot of you Libra people will experience family members who, for better or worse, will be making their transitions during this period with the transit of Saturn in the fourth house. Some say that Saturn in the fourth house is a bad place to be because it's exalted at the top of the chart. The fourth house in astrology is like between 6 and 5 o'clock in your astrology chart. If you look at it on a wall, it's at the bottom of the chart. There it is up there on the screen. But it's solidifying things from the past, getting connected with people in the past, but definitely building a better connection with family members and the women in your family. Again, a lot of people go through a lot of big transitional period with family, people moving to other locations with Saturn transiting through the 4th house. Up next is the sign of Virgo. So if you have Virgo rising, or if you don't know your rising sign, if you're just a plain out Virgo, Saturn will be making a transit through your natal 5th house. The 5th house is the house of children. The 5th house is the house of creativity. Some people will have difficulties with children, with gambling, because the 5th house rules gambling. But it also crystallizes a relationship with children. See, once again, Saturn, to me, is not all doom and gloom. It's about crystallizing a relationship with children, with gambling, with that long past, long overdue sweetheart or lover of yours. Crystallize that relationship with Saturn in the 5th house. A lot of people who haven't been, who are looking to get pregnant, usually get pregnant with Saturn transiting through the 5th house, but also on the other hand, it can be difficulty with children. And this is for Virgo rising people or Virgos if you don't know your rising sign. And again, Saturn rules older things. So a lot of people are Virgos or people with Virgo rising sign can form a bond with older people, or maybe even fall in love with people who are much older than them. See, there's yin and yang and everything. There's good energy and everything. But if you have Virgo rising, Saturn will be transiting through your 5th house. The house of children, the house of romance, the house of luck, gambling, the house of creativity. If you are an actress or an actor or performing artist, there can be difficulties in your creativity, but on the other hand, that creative project that you've been working on over the last couple of years can come to fruition. Up next is the sign of Leo. And if you are a Leo, or if you have Leo rising sign in your astrology chart, Saturn is making a transit through your natal 6th house. The 6th house in astrology is the house of work, is the house of subordinates, it's a house of service, and it's a house of health. So if you are a Leo, or if you have Leo rising sign in your chart, Saturn will be transiting through your 6th house. A lot of you may have difficulties and limitations with employees, with subordinates. A lot of you will have to really finally confront your health issues, because Saturn in the 6th house deals with health. So it's a twofold thing with Saturn, as far as I'm concerned. Again, once again, a lot of people say Saturn is strictly doom and gloom. Oh, I'm going to die, and this is going to happen, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. It's like if you know a hurricane is coming, you know what to do. The same thing with Saturn, and Saturn works the best in the sign of Capricorn, and it's coming back for the first time in 30 years almost. So Saturn will be returning to the sign of Capricorn, and for Leos, get your health together, get a checkup, know who you're working with. Really fix your health if you're a Leo, because Saturn will be transiting through your natal 6th house. Focus on health, focus on wellness, finally get well with Saturn transiting through your 6th house. If you want to talk astrology and numerology with me, the number to call, I'm a telephone person, I'm old school. Call me at 646-389-1311, 646-389-1311. I am on Facebook, I am on Twitter, I am on Instagram, and you can also email me. But the fastest way to get in touch with me, you can email me at astrologylover@hotmail.com. But the fastest and the quickest way to get told to me and find out from a personal level how Saturn's affecting you, call 646-389-1311. If your sun sign is Cancer, or I like to say, if you're a moon child, or if you have moon child rising in your astrology chart, Saturn is transiting through your 7th house. Saturn works best in the 7th house. I see a lot of Cancerian people who are looking for marriage, to finally get married because Saturn, once again, is exalted in the 7th house. Exalted means raised and lifted, and it works the best in the 7th house. So Saturn works the best when it's in the 7th house. It solidifies business relationships. It solidifies issues with your spouse or your partner. It strengthens how you do business with people. So that's what the 7th house is about. It's about business. It's about justice. A lot of you who are looking for justice in the criminal system, it will finally start to come to you with Saturn making a transit through its 7th house in the sign of Capricorn if you're a Cancer or Cancer rising sign. Up next, we have my favorite sign of the zodiac, and that is if you're a Gemini or if you have Gemini rising sign. Most of you know that I'm a Gemini. My sun sign is Gemini. My moon is Aquarius, and I have Gemini rising. Don't blame me, blame my parents. If you're a Gemini or have Gemini rising, Saturn is transiting through your 8th house, the house of death, the house of big money, corporate money, the house of deep psychic intuition, where you reach the depths of your personal self. So this is what Saturn is going to force people like ourselves, Gemini or Gemini rising, is to really get to the depths of who we are. A lot of the people with the transit of Saturn in the 7th house can fall into a lot of deviant behavior. I remember the last time, and this is not me personally, I remember the last time Saturn was transiting through my 8th house almost 30 years ago. Again, my son was born, and that was one of the happiest times for me. But it meant, and it's in the 8th house is Scorpio's house. So that it's the house of birth, death, regeneration. And also, again, I feel that it's time for big money, huge sums of money. 30 years ago, I had so much money, I didn't know what to do with it. And so if you're a Gemini, expect that crystallization effect from Saturn to, or Gemini rising sign, to sort of kind of increase your bank account a little bit. But also, if you're not ready or to get ready for the transitions that may happen from a financial point of view. So I'm looking for lots of money with this Saturn transiting through my natal 8th house, or if you have Gemini rising sign. If you are a Taurus or you have Taurus rising sign, Saturn is making a transit through your 9th house. The 9th house is the house of long distance travel, higher education, spirituality. It rules the sign of the Sagittarius. So a lot of people who have Taurus rising, Saturn is going to be in your 9th house. And watch how you travel, especially to foreign countries. Watch your obligations in dealing with people from other parts of the world, no matter where you're from. Sometimes with Saturn in the 9th house, it can make your relationship difficult with people from foreign countries, foreign places. And also, you may want to consider solidifying higher education. You may have some difficulties with higher education, but again, I think the Saturn is sort of kind of like twofold. It can bring things and crystallize and solidify things, and also it can bring destruction. So a lot of people who have Taurus rising, Saturn is transiting through the 9th house. You may want to be careful of how you travel through the universe and other countries. And also you may want to go back to school and college. Also, I know I said that earlier, but the 9th house rules higher mind and higher education. If you're an Aries or you have Aries rising sign, Saturn is making a transit through your natal 10th house, the house of career, the house of public image, the house of how you look to other people. Now, some of you on the good side of Saturn, you'll finally be able to get the recognition that you've long been waiting for with Saturn making a transit through the 10th house, or on the other hand of that, Saturn can bring disgrace to your public image. It can bring you down. It can make people see you who you really are. A lot of people, but it's good for new jobs. If you're an Aries or you have Aries rising sign, Saturn's at the top of your chart. So now is a very good time to seek a new career or start a new career with the transit of Saturn through the 10th house. Up next is the sign of Pisces. If you have or a sun sign Pisces or Pisces rising sign, Saturn will make a transit through your 11th house, your house of friends and big organization. Sometimes with Saturn transiting through the 11th house, things can become difficulty with friends for Pisces people or Pisces rising sign. You can be estranged from your friends. Your friends will not want to deal with you, but it is also the house of hopes, wishes, and desires. Something that you've been wanting for a long time will finally, if after hard work, will crystallize and come to the forefront for you. And also is a great time to work with a lot of major organizations. If you're Pisces or you have Pisces rising sign, reach out to big organizations, work with large groups of people during this period. And last but not least, we have the sign of Aquarius. If you're an Aquarius or you have Aquarius rising sign, Saturn is transiting through your 12th house. And with a lot of Aquarius people, this energy will cause you to sort of kind of just step away from people, step away from society. A lot of people will go into monk or monetary mode during this period with most Aquarius or Aquarius rising, because the 12th house rules solitude. The 12th house also, unfortunately, rules jails, hospitals, and prisons. So a lot of people with Aquarius rising sign or Aquarius energy may have to spend some time in jail, hospital, or prison. But it's about being alone and digging deep inside yourself with Saturn transiting through the 12th house. And when you come out of it, you'll be a whole brand new person. So Saturn in the 12th house is sort of kind of in Pisces territory. Don't get too lost out there if you're an Aquarius or excuse me, if you have Aquarius rising sign. Get in touch with the world. Stay in touch with the world, because none of us can live in this world by ourselves. That's about all the time that we have for astrology, numerology now, the special segment of Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. I want to thank my producer and director, Dietrich Kelsey, for producing this segment of astrology, numerology now. This is Z Starman, thanking you once again for staying tuned in. I want to say peace, love, light, namaste.
Why is it then you ask the stars up above, the planets of light, who controls your very soul, from the beginning of birth and throughout eternity? That's the stars up above.
Just ask them.
Ooh,
Just ask them.
planets of light, who controls your very soul.